Zidane Danny, Electro Ninja here, and welcome back to Electro Ninja's Lab. Now, of course, today we are going to be talking about Capcom, but specifically one of Capcom's biggest game series. We're, of course, talking about none other than Mega Man. But not just any Mega Man. No. We're talking about the Mega Man that shaped my early childhood. We are, of course, talking about Mega Man Legends. Specifically, the three games Mega Man Legends, Mega Man Legends 2, and, of course, The Misadventures of Tron Bonne, which is a prequel. Yeah, that's. Something seems wrong here, doesn't it? But, anyways, guys, like I said, today we are going to be talking about Mega Man Legends, which, like I mentioned, this is one of those games that shaped my early childhood. Now, I wasn't necessarily a huge gamer at the time. Most of my interactions with this series was watching my dad play this game on the PS1, which, obviously, these are his, so, gotta be careful with them. Which is why I'm gonna be holding them for the entire video. But these games were extremely important to my early childhood, as it was really one of the first interactions that I saw with a lot of video games. Like, obviously, every now and again I would see him playing things like Mario on the NES, or a few other games, but these were the first real games that I saw him playing on the PS1, alongside the original Spyro games. And I think that's actually a good, important point to be making. These games are not like Mega Man games. They're not like the standard, you're running along this path and it's a standard platformer. And sure, of course, there are 3D elements to them, but this was a departure from what the original series was. And I think that's part of the reason why these games never made it beyond the PlayStation 1 era, and only ever had 3 games, even though fans have been wanting many more games for many years. Remember, one of the things to keep in mind is that fans were wanting a Mega Man Legends 3 all the way back when the second game came out, because, well, it was amazing, and the second game ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, which was not fun. And remember, this was all the way back in the PS1 era. So, obviously, things were a bit complicated, to say the least. Sure, there were tons of games, but yeah, even though this is a video called Show Mega Man Legends Some Love, there's honestly no real chance that you're going to be able to pick up these games and play them. Honestly, Mega Man Legends is really hard to come by nowadays. If you want to play it, your only options are maybe find it on the PS3, which is hard to connect to. Connect that to the internet is pretty challenging nowadays because they've kind of canceled the service for that, which, needless to say, is annoying. But the PlayStation Store has kind of been canceled, and it sucks on the PS3. So you can't play it anymore. So basically, you had to have gotten it back then, back when the PlayStation Store was still open on the PS3. Which I think that there is still some ways that you can get around it, but it's challenging to say the least. But that was your last chance to get it. The PS4 and the PS5, there is no way to get your hands on these classic games. It's honestly a bit sad, considering the fact that these games are really some of the best games that we ever saw for Mega Man. Sure, they were the first introduction into 3D, but they honestly were a lot of fun. And yes, they were a departure from what the series had been. No more Dr. Wily. Dr. Light is kind of there, and so is Dr. Wily, but both of these characters are much lesser degrees, and they're not called by the same names. And basically, you meet Mega Man's kind of creator. It's a bit complicated, to say the least, but honestly, there's a lot of stuff that is in these games that unfortunately differs from the standard games. Badniks, non-existent. Um, Basically, the only people that the bad guys, quote unquote, are the Bonds, Tron Bon, Bon Bon, and I'm forgetting what his Cecil Bon. That is your main bad guys, and they're technically not even bad guys. Wow, this is the early example of villains turning to good. I could be wrong, but I think that this might no, this is before. This is after frickin' Vegeta, I'm pretty sure. But Vegeta turning to good, but I'm not 100% certain. But this is one of those early examples of the bad guys turning to good, but also kind of not, because these guys really remind me of frickin' Pokemon. Like, honestly, I think that this is after Pokemon to a certain degree, but not very far. But yeah, to a certain degree, it is very, very similar to that of, well, Pokemon. In the fact that we've got this spiky-haired kid who's ready to save the day. He has a tiny sidekick that talks to him, and that he has two friends that are, oh my gosh, this is basically Pokemon, and the bad guys are basically Team Rocket. They're bad, but they can turn good in certain situations. They want to steal your stuff, but they'll turn good if it will profit them, or if it means that they can't steal anything anymore. Yes, that is an actual thing that happens in these games. And of course, there are some other moments of... obviously, there are some bigger threats than the Bonds, but they are considered the big... these are the Team Rocket individuals, basically. And, but that's the fun thing about these games, is that you get to mess around with all sorts of really fun mechanics. And you have a really interesting story. To be honest, when I've played normal Mega Man games, I kind of feel like, this is kind of boring. Sure, there's some good story there, but it's to a much lesser degree than I feel like Mega Man Legends was. And they really got to do a lot of really cool, interesting things with these games. Having the, sure, yes, the Misadventures of Tron Bon. Yes, that is a bit, that most of its cutscenes are 2D, but for how early it was, Mega Man Legends did an amazing job with its 3D animated cutscenes, and these were still in-engine, and yeah, that is insane to me, that something like that was well done. Like, it's important to remember as well that at this point, Final Fantasy was still in the no vocals cutscenes. Yeah, there were no vocals at all in any cutscenes in Final Fantasy for a few more years before after these games came out. These really were the changing tide. Like, every single scene in these games is completely voiced, and it is incredible to see, especially for how early this was. And these games are short compared to that of things like Final Fantasy, which, keep in mind, Final Fantasy required multiple discs. This is one. So these are pretty short, and obviously they're on CD, not even DVD at this point, because these are PlayStation 1 games. So honestly, it's incredible how much they were able to pack into this game, and what they were able to do with the limited features that were on the PlayStation 1. Honestly, it's hard to find a good example of anything that was better at the time, with at least to this level. Honestly, maybe Spyro. Maybe. And Spyro is kind of an iffy situation, because while there was voice acting and stuff like that, the cutscenes were short cutscenes, hardly involved. these were a fully fledged storytelling story that did a lot for this early. And honestly, I think that's kind of an important thing to realize, is that these games were so important. But why did they fail? Why did we never get Mega Man Legends 3, or really a continuation of this series? Why didn't it get rebooted or restarted, or any number of things reimagined in a way that people could play on modern consoles? I think that the answer remains with, well, Mega Man. Normal Mega Man is a very different game from these. Remember, this is really the first real introduction of 3D for the Mega Man series, and Mega Man Legends is pretty much, including Miss Tron-Bonne, Tron-Bonne is a little bit different, but even still, it is a third-person shooter game, which that at that time was still, it was coming, but it was nowhere near the degree that we have nowadays. And I think that that's possibly why these games didn't do so well, because while these games were 3D and they were a third-person shooter, that wasn't what main Mega Man was. And Mega Man continued to do what they've done for many years to come. They continued to make games where they would focus on that 2D platformer system that they've been known for many years. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me that that would be what they would choose to stick with. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense that that would be what they would choose to stick with. They know how to do that. They've been doing it for years, and it's been successful. Mega Man Legends, well, wasn't. And sure, it's odd to see this type of system. Obviously people are going to turn away from that. That's weird to go from this classic 2D side-scrolling platform shooter to third-person 3D shooter. It's odd. And I can understand why people would avoid it, especially considering the fact that, well, these games were different. These games had a lot of extra stuff and different stuff that that earlier games, well, didn't. It had an upgrade station. It was an RPG first and foremost. It wasn't, oh, kill this thing and then gain its abilities. It was, oh, kill these things, but then you need to upgrade them and upgrade yourself and learn how to do these things through practice. And that is the thing that possibly sent people away. But on top of that, one of the things that Quixote has pointed to me as a possible reason for why these games didn't do so well is because of the strange combat system or control scheme. It's important to remember that this was PS1 era. Analog sticks, not really a thing yet. Sure, they existed at this point, but people were still not using them yet. That's something that you'll notice for a lot of PlayStation 1 games, is that very few games actually use the analog sticks. Even if the analog sticks were around at that time, very few companies still decide to use them. It wasn't really until the PS2 when people decided, okay, let's actually start using these analog sticks fully. Sure, some were already starting to get into it, but it was to a much lesser degree. I honestly think that probably Final Fantasy IX might have been one of the first few. And yes, there were some more, but those were some of the big ones. And yeah, obviously challenging. So what did they do instead? Well, they decided to use strafing on the arrow keys and L1 and R1 on your to turn, which for the time makes sense to me, at least, because the fact that a lot of games nowadays will actually use the right analog stick to actually control the camera, and you'll strafe left or right. Sure, you can turn a little bit with with the left analog stick, but it's to a much smaller degree, and for the most part it's strafing, so it makes sense to someone like me. But obviously that's not always going to be the best option. And not to mention that basically you're dealing with a much smaller degree of control. You only have L2, R2, R1, and L1, and then the D-pad and the 4 buttons. That was it. That was all that they had access to using. And honestly, considering what they had, it was incredible, but it still would turn some people off because it's different. It's weird. It's a weird control scheme for a game this early. So people would turn away from it. People wouldn't be as interested in playing this game because, well, it's different. It's weird. It's, like I said, it's confusing, to say the least. And as such, we didn't get any more. Sure, they were able to create 3 games that are honestly incredible, but these games would be the last, and sadly, we'll probably never see a continuation of this series. Mega Man Legends is done, and unfortunately, we will never see it again. Fans of the series, and you guys, while I'm sharing this information with you, you'll never be able to play these games. Or, at the very least, you may not. There is a chance that Capcom will decide, okay, let's put these back on the onto the PlayStation or the Switch or the Xbox or whatever, as basically, hey, you can play these again now. Maybe we changed like something or whatever. But they don't really have a desire to. The other Mega Mans get them a lot more money. So, why would they bother? Basically, the only people who can play these games nowadays are people who have the physical discs for the PlayStation 1, which we have to take extremely good care of nowadays, or people who have a lot of money who can buy the new games, to buy them on Amazon or wherever else, or more than likely it's going to be eBay or some other place for like $200+. No joke, that's actually what I found as a price. But that's your options right now. If the PS3 was still had the PlayStation Store active, you might be able to buy them there. But considering how challenging it is to get on there, yeah, that's not happening for a bit. You might be able to. It's, like I said, it's just tricky, especially considering the fact that they're more focused on the PS5 and the PS4 store than they are on the PS3 store. Makes sense, especially considering the fact that these consoles are like, literally the PS5 is like 10 billion times better than the PS3. So why would they care? And Capcom, why would they care? It doesn't matter to them. It's an old game. It's a game that unfortunately didn't get them a lot of money. And while sure, videos like this will draw attention to it, and some of you guys might be with me and say, hey, we want to play these games again, and maybe we can get some attention to them again. But unfortunately, it's going to take some time. I mean, remember, I'm small. I'm a small channel. And really, am I going to do anything? Probably not. But if you want to show your love and find these games and find a way to play them, then I honestly do suggest that you do at least attempt to. Because these games were truly an amazing series. And honestly, I think that they could change some of you guys' lives. Because looking back at these games, they were truly a masterpiece for their time. And they changed a lot of what we see nowadays. To be completely honest, if it wasn't for games like these, shooters may be very different from what we have nowadays. It's quite possible that 2D shooters would still, or not 2D shooters, third-person shooters would probably not be a thing. Or at least much less of a thing than they are nowadays. It's very likely that many of these people were inspired by games like Mega Man Legends. And through their inspiration, they got inspired again and again and again to the point where we are nowadays with games like Fortnite. and Overwatch, and many, many more. It remains to be seen if we will ever see Mega Man Legends return, but I for one would be ecstatic to see these games come back into fruition, and more people to see these games and love them as much as I did. But anyways, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you are able to find Mega Man Legends, definitely give them a chance and play them. But anyways, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to leave a like, leave your thoughts and theories down in the comments below. Of course, if you do have any theories, make sure to say theory review somewhere in your comment, and we will talk about it in a future video. And of course, if you guys do want to support the channel even more, then please head down to the description and check out all of our links down there, including our social medias, our other channels, and ways you can support us financially, including the merch store, the book, and of course our Patreon, which a big thank you to our current patrons, Sheeny and Joseph. And of course, if you guys have been listening to the songs over on Spotify or wherever else you've been listening to them, thank you so much, and please continue to be listening to them. Seriously, I think that you guys are going to love them. But anyways, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, like I said, please subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. But on!